Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Chapter 26. I Beat Them All. 10-Year Mission. Follow the two back to Fairy Tale. Before arriving at the guild, I saw everyone gathered in the square at the entrance of the guild from a distance. Because of the violent vibration and explosion just now, all the residents of Magnolia ran outside. Includes all members of Fairy Tale. Under the gaze of many people, the big mountain to the south of Magnolia collapsed. Fortunately, there were no villages around, and it was far from Magnolia, so the common people were not affected. In midair, Luo Zhen jumped down and landed heavily on the door of Fairy Tale. Falling to the ground, without waiting for Mrs. Carlos to ask, Luo Zhen shouted at Mrs. Carlos, "President, Urza and Mirajan are injured, find a doctor." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, the groom Carlo was startled and ran out quickly. Just when Zeus landed at the door, seeing the injuries of the second daughter on Zeus, Carlos took a deep breath. Such a serious injury. Both had been knocked unconscious. Mirajan rolled her eyes and her head fell to the side. If it wasn't for breathing, Ma Karloff even thought that Mirajan had been beaten to death. Wait, how come the wounds of the two of them seemed to have been caused by the same attack? After checking it, luckily there was nothing serious. Karloff the horse heaved a sigh of relief. Then with a serious face, he turned around and asked Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen nodded with a bright smile on his face. Said, "As expected of the president, you were really sharp-eyed. Both of them were beaten like this by me." Luo Zhen scratched his head and looked away. As Luo Zhen's voice fell, the entire guild fell silent. If eyes could speak, then there must be a voice in the guild at this moment. "You are a devil." Urza and Mirajan looked as if they were dying. If it weren't for the fact that Ma Karloff said that his life was not in danger, they would have already started to worry. "President, don't worry, I know it well." Looking at the silent horseman Carlo, Luo Zhen couldn't help but smile awkwardly, and said with a bright smile, "Forget it, send the two of them to the hospital first, and come back and tell me what's going on." Glaring at Luo Zhen, Ma Carlos still didn't pursue this matter with Luo Zhen now. Luo Zhen nodded, and waved Zeus to follow Mao's figure to the guild. Since Fairy Tale is located in the center of Magnolia, the hospital is not too far away. After sending the two daughters to the hospital, two members of the guild stayed behind to guard the hospital. When Luo Zhen returned to the guild, he immediately saw the serious-looking Carlo the horseman. Luo Zhen didn't hide anything either, and told Carlos Ma the whole story. Listening to what Luo Zhen said, Mrs. Carlo frowned deeply. So, the final result is that both of them are standing. After being silent for a long time, Carlos the horse let out a foul breath, raised his head and asked Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen nodded and said, "I thought it was impossible for them to stand under that move. Even if they stood, there would only be one of them. I underestimated their will. I knew I would have worked harder." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, the groom immediately jumped up, slapped Luo Zhen's arm with his palm, and shouted loudly, "Stinky boy, work harder, aren't you afraid of killing Urza and Mirajan?" "So, I know what's in my heart." Luo Zhen shrugged, looking like he was in control. "Forget it." Shaking his head, Ma Carlos felt helpless on his face. "Since both of them have passed your assessment, let's do what you said, make an exception and let Urza and Mirajan both become S-class wizards." Carlos Ma also knew that the three people participating in the assessment actually had the ability to become S-class wizards. The assessment is just a formality, adding a test to the participants. Kana, for example, failed the test. An S-level wizard must not only have corresponding strength, but also have a calm mind and rational judgment when necessary. 2 months later, Urza and Mirajan's injuries have also recovered. Ma Carlos also did what Luo Zhen promised, making the two of them S-class wizards. Kana on the side was a little lost, but when he thought of Urza and Mirajan being beaten like that by Luo Zhen's move, Kana was a little lucky. Can I really survive under that Luo Zhen's hands? Because they became S-class wizards at the same time, Urza and Mirajan confronted each other as usual. However, the guild was much quieter. Because Gray and Natsu went out to make commissions. Sitting at the bar drinking as usual, Luo Zhen felt that without the two of them in the guild, it would be quite boring. After clapping his hands, Luo Zhen stretched. After resting for so long, it's time to move around. Under the gaze of everyone, Luo Zhen walked up to the second floor. I looked in front of the entrustment board on the second floor. Eventually a commission was chosen. Luo Zhen took off the entrustment form and came to Ma Carlos, and handed the entrustment form to Ma Carlos for registration. After glancing at the commission, Carlos Ma's expression suddenly became serious. This is a 10-year mission, are you serious? S-level commissions are divided into common missions, 10-year missions and 100-year missions. You can hear it from the name. The difficulty of this commission is gradually increasing, and the 10-year mission is a commission that will take 10 years to complete. President, I am very confident in myself. Luo Zhen grinned, patted his arm with his palm and said with a smile. Hearing this, Carlos Ma didn't stop him. Luo Zhen's strength is obvious to all. Ever since he learned that Luo Zhen had awakened another magic that caused vibrations, Ma Karloff felt more at ease. With such strength, Luo Zhen is already a strong man at the front of the pyramid in this world. After registering the order form, Ma Carlos shouted at Luo Zhen's back, when are you going to leave? Wait until Urza comes back, I still want to eat a meal made by Urza. Luo Zhen turned his head and said with a gentle smile on his face. Ma Karloff nodded and stopped asking. There is no mandatory requirement for when the 10-year task will be completed, and it would be best for Luo Zhen to leave after being fully prepared. Chapter 27. On this day, under the watchful eye of Urza, Luo Zhen boarded the train to the Northland Plain. Looking worriedly at the leaving train, the worry in Urza's eyes seemed to overflow. Don't worry, Urza, Luo Zhen's strength is very strong, he will not have any accidents. By Urza's side, Grey Natsu and a reluctant Mirajan were both seen off at the train station. Although Mirajan's face was full of reluctance, there was still worry in her eyes. That guy won't have an accident because of a commission, he is the man I must beat. Seeing Urza's worried look, Mirajan raised her head and spoke. Urza turned his head to look at Mirajan, who held his head up, with a smile on his face. Let's go back. Urza turned around and left the train station with his companions until the shadow of the train was no longer visible. After the train traveled for nearly 2 days, Luo Zhen finally arrived near the destination. Stretching for a while, Luo Zhen felt as if his bones were about to split in the car. Fortunately, there was still Zeus who could act as a cushion for a while, otherwise the hard seat would have almost not been sent away by Luo Zhen. Sitting is tiring. After getting off the train, Luo Zhen went straight to the city hall of this town. Not long after, the people in the city hall heard that Fairy Tail had an S-rank mage coming, and someone came out to greet him. Hello, I am the mayor of Girtosta. In the conference room, an old man with pale hair but a resolute face walked in. When he saw Luo Zhen for the first time, a suspicion flashed in the mayor's eyes. Can such a young person become an S-class mage? It's not that no one has come to this commission before, but most of the visitors are older people. Here is my ID and here is the order. Seeing the suspicion in the mayor's eyes, Luo Zhen took out the certificate given to him by Mr. Carlos and the order this time from his bosom without hesitation. Seeing the proof, the mayor tentatively believed it. This commission has already replaced 6 S-level mages, and you are the 7th. Sitting on the chair, the mayor said with a lonely expression after drinking his saliva. Tell me the details of the entrustment. Luo Zhen frowned slightly, and asked the mayor seriously. The mayor nodded, and then told Luo Zhen about the details of the commission. After about half a quarter of an hour, Luo Zhen exhaled heavily. I roughly understand the content of the commission. In a mountain range near Girtosta, there is a beastmaster. The Beast King has been invading the towns and villages near the mountains all the year round, and many people have died at the mouth of the Beast King. Several nearby villages and towns jointly issued a commission to the Kingdom of Fury, which was to eliminate this Beast King. But after a long time, this Beastmaster survived the pursuit of several S-level mages. And after a period of time, the strength became stronger, and even killed these S-level mages afterwards. Now this commission has been upgraded repeatedly, and it has become a 10-year task. After understanding the whole story, Luo Zhen nodded, pointed to the towering mountain not far away and asked, the Beastmaster is there, right? The mayor nodded and replied to Luo Zhen, that's right there. With hatred in their eyes, the people in this town seemed to be kept in captivity by that Beast King. It's not that they didn't think about leaving here, but they were all stopped by the Beast King. As if possessing wisdom, the Beast King raised humans in this town as food. Exhaling a foul breath, Luo Zhen nodded and said, I see. Beckoning to Zeus, who was not far away, Luo Zhen jumped onto Zeus's back. He waved his hand at the figure of the mayor. I'll go and see what's going on first. As Luo Zhen sat on Zeus's body and soared into the sky, the mayor's eyes were full of hope. Arriving in the mountains, Luo Zhen's knowledgeable and domineering aura is activated. In an instant, the scenes of the mountains came into Luo Zhen's mind. Flying around the mountains for a long time, Luo Zhen's knowledgeable domineering didn't even perceive the figure of the Beast King. Logically speaking, the Beastmaster should not be small in size. But in the mountains, Luo Zhen did detect many larger monsters, but they were all too weak. The figure of the Beast King did not appear from the beginning to the end. Luo Zhen couldn't help frowning. Could it be that the Beast King left? Shaking his head, Luo Zhen searched around the mountains twice more, but there was still no clue of the Beastmaster. Because the Beastmaster could not be found, Luo Zhen had no choice but to leave first. Back in town, Luo Zhen approached the mayor. In the hands of the mayor, he got the image of the Beast King. After telling that the Beastmaster didn't seem to be in the mountains, the mayor's mood suddenly became very excited. Emotionally retorted to Luo Zhen, "Impossible, that beast will never leave." Luo Zhen narrowed his eyes, opened his mouth and asked the mayor, "What do you mean by what you just said? What do you mean he can't leave?" The mayor came to his senses, and after calming down, a smile appeared on his old face. Said to Luo Zhen, "It's not interesting, that beast kept us here, he can't leave easily." Seeing that the mayor seemed to be hiding something, Luo Zhen pondered for a moment, then raised his head and said to the mayor, "If you have concealed the entrusted information, I can immediately give up the entrustment and I can go back now." Being stared at by Luo Zhen's Huang, the mayor fell silent. Gritting his teeth, he replied in a low voice, "That beast appeared in that mountain range 9 years ago. When it appeared in the past, it ate a group of hunters who went hunting in the mountains, and then it ate people in the surrounding towns and villages. The animal appears regularly every time, it appears on August 1st every year." Under the mayor's notice, Luo Zhen frowned slightly. August 1st is only half a month away from now. After a moment of silence, Luo Zhen nodded and said, "I will stay in the town and wait for half a month. If you think of anything else, I hope you can tell me right away." Luo Zhen's meaningful eyes glanced at the mayor, and being stared at by Luo Zhen, the mayor forced a smile on his face, and said with an apologetic smile, "Of course." Chapter 28. After staying in the town for a while, after the people in the town knew Luo Zhen's identity, they treated Luo Zhen very well. Strolling on the streets of the town, watching the friendly eyes of everyone on the street, Luo Zhen also smiled at everyone. Tomorrow will be what the mayor calls the 1st of August. Luo Zhen's expression was slightly serious. With the coming of night, Luo Zhen was lying on the bed with his arms behind his head, looking at the ceiling with calm eyes. As time passed, Luo Zhen closed his eyes and fell asleep in a short while. The next day was what the mayor called August 1st. Today Luo Zhen got up early in the morning. Sitting on the body of Zeus, Luo Zhen went straight to the mountains. Zeus has been watching here in the mountains these days. But there was no movement of the Beast King at all. Not long after Luo Zhen arrived at the mountain range, Luo Zhen suddenly perceived the sudden appearance of a huge creature under the color of his knowledge. Luo Zhen's eyes were fixed, and he patted Zeus under him. Zeus understood and rushed in the direction Luo Zhen pointed. Just after Luo Zhen approached the mountain range, a roar that resounded through the sky echoed in the mountain range. The roar resounded through the sky, and the people in the town were frightened by the roar, and they all hid in their houses. In the city hall, the mayor looked hopefully at the mountain range not far away. In the distance, the huge monster appeared from the ground. The monster roaring up to the sky was full of fierceness, its huge head suddenly turned around, and its huge eyes as big as lanterns suddenly stared at Luo Zhen. Roar. With fierce eyes full of violence, he let out a deafening roar at Luo Zhen. Frowning, a cold light flashed in Luo Zhen's eyes. Prometheus. Luo Zhen opened his mouth to drink softly, and then Prometheus rushed straight away with his body wrapped in intense heat. Fireballs spewed out from Prometheus' mouth continuously, and spewed towards the huge monster. The moment the fireball hit the Beastmaster's body, a violent explosion occurred. After the smoke and dust cleared, the Beast King was intact, without any injuries. Frowning, Luo Zhen couldn't help being a little surprised. He knew the strength of Prometheus best, and such an attack actually left the Beastmaster unscathed. Zeus, you go too. Patting Zeus under him, Luo Zhen jumped off him, falling straight from the air. It crashed to the ground with a bang. After receiving the order, Zeus also rose into the sky, and together with Prometheus, he attacked the Beast King. Countless thunder and fireballs bombarded the huge body of the Beastmaster. Roar, bang, bang, bang. The attacks of Zeus and Prometheus continuously caused explosions on the Beastmaster's body. Although it was not painful, it still made the Beastmaster extremely furious. Grabbed a towering tree at the side, and threw it straight to Zeus and the others in the air. Seeing that Zeus's attack had no effect, Luo Zhen was not going to sit still. His body flickered in the forest, and he approached the Beastmaster in a short while. The moment Luo Zhen's figure appeared, the Beast King also found Luo Zhen. He let out a deafening roar at Luo Zhen. The huge palm patted it straight. Looking at the huge palm slapped above his head, Luo Zhen stomped on the ground. The ground cracked, and spider webs of cracks spread. Luo Zhen's figure disappeared instantly. When it reappeared, Luo Zhen flashed to the front of the Beastmaster. Clenching his fist tightly, he punched the Beastmaster hard on the head. With Luo Zhen's punch, the Beast King's body crashed down. It fell straight to the ground. While the Beastmaster was knocked down with a punch, the power of the shaking fruit was attached to Luo Zhen's fist. Luo Zhen rushed forward, punching the Beastmaster one after another. The severe pain made the Beastmaster let out a deafening roar, and waved his huge palm to knock Luo Zhen into the air. Possessing knowledgeable domineering aura, Luo Zhen easily dodged the Beastmaster's random attacks. Soon, the Beastmaster lost his movement under Luo Zhen's attack. Every punch has the ability to shake the fruit, completely shattering the internal organs of the Beast King. Looking at the Beastmaster who fell to the ground and lost his movement, Luo Zhen couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, the strength of this Beastmaster shouldn't make it difficult for S-level mages. Just when Luo Zhen was wondering, the whole mountain range suddenly began to tremble. The nearby forest suddenly began to shake and tremble, and all the trees on the ground were collapsing. Taking a closer look, countless monsters appeared underground. Roar! The moment these monsters crawled out of the ground, they raised their heads and roared into the sky. Luo Zhen's complexion sank so much. These monsters that emerged from the ground looked exactly like the Beast King that was killed. This Beast King is actually a social creature. Luo Zhen jumped up from the ground and landed on Zeus. Looking at the entire mountain range filled with figures of monsters, Luo Zhen couldn't help being speechless. With a sullen face, Luo Zhen said to Zeus under him, "Go back to Gear Toasta first." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Zeus turned his head and flew towards the town without hesitation. Not long after, Luo Zhen returned to the town and went straight to the city hall. Coming to the city hall, Luo Zhen found the mayor. He looked at the mayor with a sullen face. Why hide it? Seeing Luo Zhen's dark face, the mayor squeezed a smile on his face, pretending to be ignorant and said, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean." Luo Zhen sneered, and then said, "I don't know, then I'm leaving, you can handle the matter of the Beast King yourself." After speaking, Luo Zhen turned his head and was about to leave. Seeing the back of Luo Zhen about to walk out of the city hall, the mayor gritted his teeth and quickly shouted at Luo Zhen, "Wait. I tell you." The mayor's face was ugly, and he seemed to have aged 10 years. Under the mayor's remark, Luo Zhen's face became more and more gloomy. It turns out that these monsters have appeared here in the mountains for these years. The leaders of these monsters, that is, the real Beast Kings, are wise. The Beastmaster had no idea about these common people, when the Beastmaster planned to slaughter all the nearby villages and towns. The mayor and the Beastmaster have reached a cooperation. Beastmaster spared these common people, but the mayor tried to find a way to send a magician with powerful magic power to the Beastmaster every year. Those S-class mages who came to crusade against the Beast King before all died at the hands of the monster because of the persecution of the mayor. He didn't even see the face of the Beastmaster. It's just that the mayor didn't expect that Luo Zhen's strength was so strong that after killing the monster, he completely made the Beast King furious. The beast horde was approaching, and the mayor had a bitter smile on his face. Maybe they shouldn't have cooperated with that Beast King in the first place. Chapter 29. After listening to the mayor's words, Luo Zhen suddenly fell silent. There was an ugly smile on the mayor's face, and he sat slumped on the chair as if he had aged 10 years. Have all those beasts recovered? After learning what happened in the mountains, the mayor was silent for a long time. His face became extremely ugly, and he muttered to himself, "It's over, everything is over." He had seen these magical beasts forming a beast tide back then, in a nearby Magister's guild. In order to resist that beast tide, everyone in the entire guild died in that beast tide. But after those mages were all sacrificed, the beast tide receded for some reason. Now the mayor can only place his hope on Luo Zhen in front of him. The roar that resounded through the sky can still be heard in the ears. Luo Zhen pondered for a long time, lowered his eyes and said to the mayor, "How many villages are there near the mountains?" Hearing Luo Zhen's words, the mayor quickly replied, "Because of the appearance of the Beast King, I have ordered people to relocate all the people from the nearby villages to the town. It happens every year." Luo Zhen nodded, then asked, "Is there any armed force in the town?" Hearing Luo Zhen's words, the mayor said with a wry smile, "We are just a small town, and there is no army stationed by the kingdom." Luo Zhen sighed. The deafening roar seemed to be getting closer. Luo Zhen was silent, walking towards the outside of the city hall without saying a word. On the wall of the small town, Luo Zhen stood there alone. Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon are floating beside each other in the air. Seeing the rushing beast tide, Zeus couldn't help but be speechless. "Master, do we really want to fight them?" Swallowing, Zeus asked Luo Zhen tremblingly. "You three, play freely." Luo Zhen glanced at Zeus, and then jumped directly from the top of the city wall. Coming outside the city wall, a circle of light appeared on Luo Zhen's fist. A heavy punch hit the ground, accompanied by the vibration of the ground. A bottomless crack suddenly appeared on the ground in front of him, and the crack continued to grow until the ground was completely split. The crack in front of him continued to extend, and within a moment it turned into a bottomless abyss. Standing on the edge of the crack, Luo Zhen turned his head and shouted to Zeus and the others on the city wall, "Your purpose is to stop these beasts, don't let them come from here." The beast tide is close at hand, and Zeus and the others on the city wall can already see the monsters at the forefront of the beast tide. After getting the order, Zeus and the others' eyes became firm. Looking at the smoke and dust rushing in the distance, countless monsters roared and charged towards the small town. Luo Zhen bent her legs slightly, and the ability to shake the fruit emerged on Luo Zhen's fist. A fierce punch hit the void beside him. The space shattered, and cracks continued to spread in the void beside Luo Zhen. In an instant, the group of galloping monsters in the distance suddenly stopped. Countless blood mist exploded, and the shrill screams echoed outside the town. With a leap, Luo Zhen stepped directly across the bottomless abyss in front of him. He rushed into the beast tide and waved his fists. Zeus and the others in the air didn't show any weakness either, they continuously sent down thunder and exploded in the beast horde. The sword light surged, and Napoleon was flying in the beast tide, and the sharp sword light smashed the approaching monsters one after another. Luo Zhen stepped lightly, jumping among the beast tide. "Go straight to the mountains where the beast tide is coming. To capture the thief, capture the king first, and hand over the town to Zeus and the others for protection." Luo Zhen went straight to the Beastmaster. There are still countless monsters roaring in the mountains, constantly rushing towards the small town. Luo Zhen's complexion was slightly heavy, looking at the galloping herd. Running all the way, countless monsters have become the souls of Luo Zhen's subordinates. Suddenly, on the top of a mountain range in the distance, a huge beast is roaring upwards. There is a humanized light in the eyes of this monster. The moment Luo Zhen noticed him, the monster also noticed Luo Zhen for the first time. Seeing this huge monster, Luo Zhen's eyes froze. This should be the king of beasts. With a fierce step on the ground with both legs, the whole person soared into the sky. "Go straight to the Beastmaster." Roar. The moment Luo Zhen was about to approach the Beastmaster, a huge monster suddenly appeared in front of Luo Zhen, blocking Luo Zhen's way forward. "Go away." Luo Zhen let out an angry roar, and swung his fist heavily to hit the Warcraft's chest. With a bang, the monster's chest exploded directly. Blood gushed out, soaking Luo Zhen's whole body in blood. The bloody Luo Zhen ran wildly in the forest. Soon came to the mountain of the Beast King. The Beastmaster turned around and stared at Luo Zhen with a pair of eyes full of wisdom. You killed my descendants. Suddenly, the Beastmaster spoke, and a heavy voice came out of his mouth. It's me. Frowning, Luo Zhen was a little surprised that the Beast King could speak. Bury it with my descendants. A mouthful of breath spewed out from the mouth of the Beast King, and Luo Zhen, who was bathed in blood, was not afraid at all. Against the raging flames, he walked forward step by step. Breathing stopped, the Beastmaster looked at the unscathed Luo Zhen in horror, his eyes became extremely heavy. I've never seen a human like you. The thick voice of the Beast King came, and there was a little awe in the voice. With a cold smile, Luo Zhen's eyes were filled with fierce killing intent. Instead of continuing to talk nonsense with the Beastmaster, Luo Zhen stomped on the ground. An afterimage flashed before Beastmaster's eyes. Rushing to the front of the Beastmaster, a circle of light appeared above his fist. A heavy punch hit the Beastmaster's head. With one hit, the Beastmaster's body was punched for a while. Suddenly a mouthful of blood spewed out from the Beastmaster's mouth, with violence in his eyes. He raised his head and let out a roar towards the sky. Along with the Beast King's roar, the herds of beasts in the mountains also began to roar. Go to hell, the Beastmaster roared, waved his huge palm and patted Luo Zhen straight down. Come. With a roar, Luo Zhen clenched his fists and went straight to the huge palm of the Beastmaster. Accompanied by a bang, Luo Zhen couldn't help but took 2 steps back. The figure of the Beastmaster flew upside down and crashed heavily into the mountains behind him. Taking advantage of the victory and pursuing, Luo Zhen clenched his fists and rushed forward. Armed with the ability of the shaking fruit, his fists kept pounding on the Beastmaster's body. Luo Zhen himself didn't know how many punches he had thrown. Until the smoke cleared, a huge pothole appeared on the mountain. The body of the Beastmaster was in the center of the pit, already bloody from being beaten by Luo Zhen. Exhaling heavily, the Beast King in front of him had completely lost his vitality. The monsters at the foot of the mountain seemed to sense the passing of the Beastmaster, and suddenly became very restless, galloping towards the depths of the mountain. Chapter 30. Without the command of the Beast King, the beast tide quickly became restless and violent. They flocked to the depths of the mountains one after another, and the earth began to tremble. Luo Zhen turned his head and took a look at the bloody flesh, but he couldn't see the flesh that looked like a Beast King at all. Fists crossed in front of chest. As countless monsters poured into the mountains, Luo Zhen punched hard to the side. With the shaking of the mountain range, the mountain body began to crack, and the ground also began to crack with violent tremors. The monsters roared, but they were helpless in front of the huge rubble, and fell into the cracks one after another. Huge boulders fell, crushing countless monsters to death, and the monsters that couldn't stop also fell into the abyss one after another. In front of the city wall, Zeus and the others breathed a sigh of relief as they watched the beast tide that turned around and rushed towards the mountains. Even though the bottomless abyss intercepted the beast horde, it still almost made the beast horde break through to the town. It should be something the master did to make all these monsters rush towards the mountains. Looking at the backs of the monsters fleeing in a panic, Prometheus said with solemn eyes, floating beside Zeus. Then let's hurry to support the master. Hearing what Prometheus said, Zeus, who was covered in thunder and lightning, shouted. Looking at each other, Zeus, Prometheus and Napoleon flew towards the mountains. Flying all the way, I saw countless monster corpses. Zeus and the others couldn't help being startled. Until in the depths of the mountains, Luo Zhen was seen crazily slaughtering in the wave of monsters, waving his fists to shake and kill the surrounding monsters. Fire from the sky. Prometheus spit out countless fireballs, and they spewed out towards the beast tide that was rushing towards Luo Zhen on the ground. Falling into the beast tide, the fireball exploded instantly, and the sound of constant explosions echoed in the mountains. Shock Yu Lei. Zeus was not to be outdone. The thunder and lightning in the sky danced wildly, turning into ferocious thunder snakes and blasting towards the ground. Luo Zhen, who was in the beast tide, looked up and noticed Zeus and the others in the sky. With a sharp step on the ground, the whole person jumped up. It fell directly on Zeus. Master, are you okay? Zeus, who was covered in thunder and lightning, saw Luo Zhen and hurriedly asked Luo Zhen. The reason is that the appearance of Luo Zhen is too scary now. His whole body was bathed in blood, and the strong smell of blood on his body scared Zeus and the others. Luo Zhen shook his head and didn't answer. Looking at the endless tide of beasts under his feet, Luo Zhen finally understood why this was a 10-year mission. With this level of beast hordes, ordinary S-level mages would have been trampled to death in the beast horde. A circle of light appeared on Luo Zhen's fist, and he punched hard into the air around him. Space shattered and mountains began to crumble. Countless monsters were buried under the rubble of the mountain. In this blow, Luo Zhen used all his strength, and the mountain range was completely shattered. The earthquake covered the entire mountain range, and violent tremors could be felt in towns. Houses collapsed and many people were buried by houses. Some monsters were not buried by the rubble, and they were already shaken to death the moment the earthquake struck. The entire mountain range is full of blood and corpses of monsters. A strong smell of blood wafts through the dilapidated mountains. This blow directly killed the warcraft in the mountains in one blow. He exhaled heavily and shook off the dried blood. Luo Zhen felt sticky and uncomfortable. Under the knowledgeable and domineering perception, there are almost no living things in the mountains. Most of the monsters buried deep in the mountains were seriously injured. To be on the safe side, Luo Zhen smashed into the air with another blow. There was another violent tremor, and the mountain range seemed to be pulsating, constantly undulating. Luo Zhen sat down on Zeus's body, and the continuous fighting made Luo Zhen feel a little exhausted. Let's go back. Exhaling a foul breath, Luo Zhen patted Zeus's body and said, "Okay, master." Hearing Luo Zhen's order, Zeus turned his head and flew in the direction of Girtosta. In the town, many houses were knocked down. Many people suffered injuries of varying degrees, but fortunately no one died. Back in the town, Luo Zhen found the mayor, who was condolences to the residents. Seeing Luo Zhen drenched in blood, the mayor was also startled at first. But after hearing that Luo Zhen solved the beast tide and the beast king was killed, he could not help kneeling in front of Luo Zhen and weeping bitterly. The aftermath of the aftermath was handed over to the mayor, and Luo Zhen returned to the place where he lived. Fortunately, the hotel didn't collapse due to the shock just now. Luo Zhen went back to the room and took a shower to wash away the sticky blood behind him. After all matters were dealt with, Luo Zhen also set out on his way home. Sitting on Zeus' body and flying towards the train station in the city, Luo Zhen put his hands behind his head. After a while, Luo Zhen fell asleep on Zeus' body. In order for Luo Zhen to have a good sleep, Zeus slowed down drastically. 2 days later, Luo Zhen returned to Magnolia. After getting off the train, Luo Zhen exhaled heavily, twisted his body, and walked towards Fairy Tale. Strolling in Magnolia, the residents of Magnolia saw Luo Zhen and showed friendly smiles to Luo Zhen. "Hey, brother Luo Zhen." Walking down the street, suddenly a familiar voice came from behind. Luo Zhen turned his head and looked. Lisina and Mirajan were behind him. Luo Zhen turned around and waved to Lisina with a smile on his face. "Yo, it's Lisina, where are you going? Sister Mira is going to take us out as a commission, but Alfman's big brother hasn't come yet." Lisina stuck out her tongue, and quickly ran to Luo Zhen's side. Although Luo Zhen severely injured Mirajan in the wizard assessment, Lisina did not resent Luo Zhen because of this. "A commission." Luo Zhen frowned, and curiously asked Mirajan, who was silent at the side, "What commission? Is it dangerous?" Mirajan stared, raised her head proudly, and said to Luo Zhen, "What does it have to do with you? I'm already an S-level mage, and I can handle any danger myself." Seeing Mirajan's arrogant look, Luo Zhen rolled his eyes, and then looked at Lisina. Lisina smiled, and said to Luo Zhen with a smile, "It's a commission to hunt down bandits, but it's not an S-level commission. Sister Mira wants to let Alfman's big brother practice his skills." Hearing this, Luo Zhen felt relieved. Luo Zhen was worried that because of his appearance, Mirajan became an S-level mage ahead of time, and then went ahead to do the commission to crusade against the Beastmaster. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.